This is QC Pod. I'm Samantha Galvez-Montiel. Today, we will be meeting with Benjamin Strassfield of the Media Studies Department at Queens College. He teaches media censorship as well as media criticism. I have asked him to talk about his thoughts on the recent terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol and former President Trump's ban on many social media outlets. As a professor of media studies, he gives us insight into the picture the news media paints, as well as the major differences between reality and fiction we have come to see this past year of 2020. We deep dive into the upcoming presidency of Joe Biden and the new social changes to come. So first up, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on what happened?
Uh, I think like most people, spent January 6th just constantly, updating social media and reading the news and watching the news and horrified. It was a terrifying, terrifying day. And those images of rioters on the floor of the U.S. Senate were terrifying, and the kind of knowledge of how, for as bad as this was, it could have been even worse. There could have been, yeah, executions. There could have been bombs set off. That all of that is absolutely terrifying.
Do you think it was like partly the media's fault because they have been reporting what Trump's been saying and it also caused like an excitement in people?
I think first off, we need to think about what we mean when we say the media, because we're talking about a lot of different things. Different types of media outlets, and then also different types of media, social media, TV, news media, so on. So I think there's a couple things there. One is that very clearly there is a kind of right-wing news echo chamber that has parroted, yeah, a lot of um, President Trump's conspiracy theories about the election being stolen, and in echoing those comments and pushing them forward, they created the kind of context for the events of January 6th and bear real kind of culpability for that. I also think that, yeah, there's other questions about what the kind of role of mainstream news media is in this. Should they have been covering Trump in a different way, one that didn't, even if they were trying to push back against these, lies and conspiracy theories, that they were kind of inadvertently brought down. So it's a question, yeah, should they have been covering Trump in a different way? I don't think we have the answer to that, but obviously it's going to be a question that we're going to be asking for a while.
And okay, so do you think that like the way people are like conservatives, like Tommy Lauren is tweeting about this like crazy. Um
Wait,
and I'm sure
sorry,
you're
who'd you say?
familiar with her, right?
Oh, yeah.
Tommy Lauren. Yeah, so she's trying to like she posted something along the lines of she was, distraught and upset about what happened, but liberals loved it, early on this year. And like what do you think? Do you think it compares to Black Lives Matter protests and like other protests that have happened this year?
No, they're not comparable. They're not. They're not comparable in a lot of different ways. One being that there's a difference in expressions of protesting and anger, born out of real police brutality and systemic racism, versus an attempt to overturn an election and stage a coup. These are just kind of fundamentally different things. Um, and yeah, the vast majority of Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful, and I also think that there is a difference between looting a Target and going into the Capitol, with the intention of assassinating the vice president of the United States and the Speaker of the House. And we need to be able to distinguish these things because they are not the same. That being said, we do need to have a discussion about, yeah, how social movements, yeah, protest movements organize online, and there are, yeah, similarities in the kind of use of social media between these two things. And yeah, there's been this, yeah, this hope that social media would, overthrow authoritarian governments, and we saw that, yeah, around 2010, 11 with the Arab
Hmm.
Spring. And yeah, Black Lives Matter has used social media and smart ways to, yeah, organize and to broadcast their message. But when people were getting excited about the power of social media to, fight back against authoritarianism, what a lot of people missed is that the far right extremists and white supremacists can do the same stuff. They can also organize on social media platforms, and
Hmm.
they've been doing it. They've been doing it openly for years now, and this is the result of that.
Yeah, I think it's really funny how we see like all these things and like people don't see that whatever, Black Lives Matter people could do, so can other people. And it's so funny because I saw there's a bunch of videos saying like how if it was a Black Lives Matter protest, there would have been like tear gas and rubber bullets all over again. And which I want to think about, like, what do you think is the most acceptable punishment for all these people that were there? But what do you think is really going to happen to them?
Huh. So, I mean, first to the point you make, yeah, the about, yeah, the deferring, yeah, um, yeah, response to these protests, to Black Lives Matter and these riots at the Capitol. There's no way around that. Yeah, the police have historically treated leftist uh, protesters far, far more harshly than far right protesters, and yeah, the Capitol is just one example of that. As to, yeah, what's going to happen to these people, I mean, I think that, look, I think that this was so bad that there's a good chance that, like, there will be real consequences for the, yeah, the people who broke in and stole stuff from Nancy Pelosi's office and who were violent with Capitol police officers. I think that there will be real consequences, in part because this was such a major event, and we, need to feel like there's something happening. But the issue isn't, what happens to these, X number of people who broke into the Capitol. The issue is the many other supporters and people who are going to, yeah, QAnon supporters and white supremacists who are organizing online and are going to continue to do so. And this won't be the end. There will be more horrific events. And the question is, what do we do about that? And what do we do to prevent the next version of this? Because unless we kind of deal with the broader problem and not just these, rioters who were arrested, unless we deal with that broader problem, we're inevitably heading to another horrific event like this, or like Charlottesville, or yeah, any number of other kind of um, white supremacist violent actions.
Yeah, I think they're starting now because I live like in Maspeth, and it's close to Middle Village, and I saw on the news that some guy got arrested for posting like threats online, like that were kind of equivalent to the Capitol siege, and the FBI actually came out and were like arresting him and stuff. It's crazy how different it is now. Like, you really, people thought that you could say anything on the internet, but now it's you can't say anything on the internet. Which um, what is your thoughts on Trump's ban of social media? People think it's like an infringement
I
on his
mean,
rights.
I'll say, yeah, a couple things. As having taken my class, and anybody who's taken my media censorship course can tell you that this is not a First Amendment right. That's the important thing that gets missed all the time in discussing this, is that Facebook, Twitter can ban whoever it wants. The First Amendment protects against the government curtailing speech. It doesn't protect against private companies choosing who is and is not on their platform. So that's like the first thing that needs to be set up front because, yeah, there is, yeah, misunderstanding there that often gets repeated. Um, I also think kind of more broadly is that, yeah, two things. One is that social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter have been regulating speech for years now, and conservatives and Republicans haven't had any issue with it. And the reason is because they were banning images of women's nipples and people breastfeeding, and they were banning sex workers from being on their platforms. And throughout that, all that's going on, there's no outrage. Everybody's just kind of okay with that type of suppression of speech by these social media platforms. And now there's a kind of, yeah, outrage over this. I would take that outrage more seriously if they were actually similarly outraged by all the types of suppression of speech that had been going on for years on these platforms. And then the other point I'll make here is that the reason, broadly speaking, the reason that Facebook and Twitter are constantly kind of having to take such a major role in figuring out, yeah, what is hate speech that we're going to take off our platform and what isn't. The reason that they have to do so is because the U.S. government doesn't do so. Yeah, when we can contrast what the U.S. does here with what Germany does, and Germany after the Holocaust um, this yeah realize that certain types of hate speech lead to violence, and so they have policies enacted against hate speech. You cannot deny the Holocaust in Germany. You can't espouse hate speech there. It is a crime. The US hasn't dealt with its history of white supremacy. It hasn't dealt with its history of fascism in this country. And so as a result of not kind of reckoning with that, we allow hate speech to proliferate. And so the reality is that a lot of most of the kind of hate speech websites around the globe, most of them are based in the U.S. because if they're based in the U.S., they can, yeah, be allowed to operate in ways that if they were based in much of Europe, they wouldn't be allowed to be. So all that is just to say that the reason that, yeah, Facebook and Twitter have such an incredibly powerful role in kind of figuring out their policies and shaping speech is because the U.S. government has refused to do so and has refused to take a stand on hate speech and is allowed to proliferate. And that's the reason that you have, yeah, social media platforms trying to figure out what their policies should be.
Hmm, that's interesting. Like I was just like the thing that popped in my head would be like, um, do you think people will find it equivalent to China if their speech was kind of like limited like that by the government? Because if they stepped in all the time, would like and like what would be differentiating what hate speech is? Because canceled is like kind of like hate
I
speech
mean,
in a sense.
I'll say two things. One, in terms of like, yeah, canceled, things like that. There's, I think we need to make a distinction between someone being canceled and someone being censored. A lot of, yeah, a lot of people have been canceled are doing just fine. J.K. Rowling was canceled because she had transphobic comments. J.K. Rowling's a billionaire. She's writing a new movie right now. She'll have a new book coming out soon. She's doing fine. This notion
Mm-hmm.
of like people getting canceled and like that's the end of their life and the end of their career, yeah, that's like a thing we could talk about, but these notions often get really kind of overblown, and we lose kind of sight of, yeah, that people can be criticized and should be criticized for certain views that they espouse, and them being criticized is not the same thing as them being canceled. As to your other question about, yeah, kind of comparison to China, I think that Look, I think the reality is that oh, it's all
I'm
right.
sorry,
I
that was a
just
hard question.
pausing to think. I think the reality is that the U.S. There are ways to figure out what hate speech is and to make definitions of it. There are other places that do so, and part of that means a kind of reckoning with um, yeah, kind of power imbalances. And we don't kind of like to do that in this country. We're kind of squeamish about these notions. So yeah, the um, we don't like the idea of differentiating between the statements black power and white power, but there are real differences between those statements. There are real differences between those statements, and so part of the issue is that we don't want to in this country kind of recognize race as a thing, recognize power of these racial categories and kind of structures in our society as a whole. And so there are ways to deal with hate speech, but it's going to take a kind of reckoning with power relations and power differentials and understanding, yeah, how, yeah, statements applied to different groups carry different weight because of the violence and suppression of certain marginalized groups in the society.
hmm Um, so like, do you think with the inauguration coming up, do you think anything's gonna happen? Or like,
Oh,
what
I
do you
hope
think would
not.
happen?
I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I hope that
hmm
that the events of January 6th at the Capitol were such a wake up call to this country that yeah, that it won't happen again, or at least it won't happen right now so soon afterwards. I think that yeah, it's not, there was, it's also about, what are the things that happen but we don't end up costing people lives. So yeah, there was somebody who was apparently had falsified papers for the to get into the inauguration, who got arrested because they were falsified and because he was trying to bring in a van that had 500 rounds of ammunition and guns, and he got caught and nothing happened. So like, that'll be a kind of footnote that we all move on from and forget about months and years from now. But I think we aren't fully reckoning with all the kind of um, very close things to happening that don't end up happening, and so we all kind of move on. Last year there was a plot to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan by far right extremists, and we all just kind of moved on from this. But there was a plot to kidnap and kill, assassinate a sitting governor, and yeah, I hope that there isn't new violence. But I think, yeah, I think fears of that are certainly well founded.
hmm hmm Um, so like, there's like a lot. I follow TikTok a lot because like I don't know if you know, but I do run like the school account, the school
Yeah.
papers TikTok account, and yeah. So what I've been seeing a lot of is that people from the other parts of the world are just like, America, are you okay? Like, do you think the siege of the Capitol would be like a prime example of what America really is about?
It's a great question, and I think that's, yeah, particularly as we're moving into the, Biden administration now. I think what that's a question we're going to
hmm
have to really grapple with, and there's going to be, yeah, on the one hand you have um, yeah, Biden using kind of language of like, yeah, about the Capitol tax, like that this isn't us, like this isn't, the America that we all know and love. Like we are a country that is great and united and does amazing things. Um, and there's obviously, yeah, particularly after the last 4 years, a power in the kind of unifying message like that. And I understand the kind of, yeah, political utility of a message like that. At the same time, yeah, as the U.S. Historian, the events of the Capitol were very much a part of a long history of of what's been going on in this country, of white supremacists, far right extremists, fascist supporters who um, don't believe in democracy and are willing to enact violence to suppress those who they see as their enemies. So, yeah, I think, I know it's a bit of, yeah, two answers there, but I think, yeah, on the one hand, there is a importance to rejecting this as a kind of as being as being American in ideology and in their ideals, and at the same time understanding that this fits with a broader history that is very much part of America's history.
Yeah, people like it's always that other mentality of get over it happened 400 years ago. Like but what I think to that is it's still happening because look at what happened just recently and look at how many people are still okay with using the N word in such a mean way. It's not an it's a term of endearment now, amongst African Americans. And do you think that America is really hard to like have like do you think America can't settle with change? Cuz with Biden coming in, that type of change is really different for the far right. Yeah. So, do you think America has a problem with change?
I mean,
Social
I think
change?
that, yeah, one interpretation of what's been going on for the last 5 years, not only with the rise of Trump, but with the rise of kind of, yeah, far right extremists, white supremacists, kind of, yeah, proudly marching in the streets, and QAnon, growing in prominence online. Yeah, that one kind of a way of interpreting that is that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Uh, Okay, so yeah, one way of interpreting these last 4 or 5 years then is about that there is a violent backlash to perceived change in American society. America, the country, is getting more diverse. We saw our obviously first black president in this country's history. And those changes being undergone by America, those are only rapidly kind of moving forward. And it's not just about race; it's also about, yeah, gender, sexuality. Continue on down the list, and yeah, you have a sense, yeah, that America is changing and getting more diverse, and that particularly among white men, though white women also play a kind of role in this as well, is that there's a backlash to that. There's fears of what that means for them, and fears of, yeah, kind of their perceived diminishing social power, and that's a problem. Yeah, that creates yeah, the kind of conditions for extremism and violence, and it's scary and something we need to reckon with. But the reality is that the changes of this country getting more diverse, those that's not going to stop. That's what's happening. The demographic trends are the demographic trends, and so it's about us figuring out ways to, you know, um, alleviate the backlash to that.
Yeah, so like what do you think that with Biden's coming presidency, like I was skeptical and like I voted for him and it was like it was like the lesser evil, like a lot of people said that are you pro Biden or are you just anti Trump? And I'm like I'm anti Trump because, as an Asian person, I don't appreciate him calling it kung flu, like it only just hurts us. It doesn't really, help us. Um, but I don't. What do you think will come out of Biden's presidency? Like, do you think any change will really happen? Because people have this weird image that it'll happen like overnight and things will be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that the Obama years can teach us some stuff about what to expect. On the one hand, yeah, these you know there was real change enacted during Obama's 8 years in office. On the other hand, like the hopes in 2008 that we were going to be entering some kind of political utopia with Obama becoming president. Clearly, that didn't happen. The reality of change is that it's slow, that it's really, really messy, and that it's really hard. And it's particularly hard when there is intransigent opposition fighting tooth and nail on everything. And that's part of the question that's going to come up now is, yeah, for a lot of Obama's presidency, he was actively trying to kind of win over Republican support in the Senate and in Congress, and hoping that he could enact sensible bipartisan solutions to key issues, and those largely failed, and they largely failed because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell at that time felt that there was no political utility for Republicans to cooperate with President Obama, other Democrats, and so that meant that all the kind of policy making that was happening during Obama's administration that was happening without any type of real bipartisan support. And so the question is going into this, Biden administration is, did Biden learn from that? Is he going to, spend the next 4 years trying to um, win over Republican support on issues that he's just not going to win their support on? Or is he going to, try to enact real legislation that will make a real difference, and do so largely without Republican support? I mean, it's great if he can get it on certain issues, but there's a problem when one of the two political parties doesn't believe that climate change is real. It is, and it becomes very difficult to enact. We should be having a debate over how we respond to climate change. What are the specific policies that we should enact to address this issue? But if one of the two political parties doesn't believe it's happening, then you can't really find a compromise there. And so all that is just a long way of saying, like, we don't know what's going to happen, but certainly I don't think that Republican opposition to any type of Democratic, proposed policies, that's just going to, disappear, and we're going to enter some new bipartisan era. It's going to be about fighting tooth and nail. It's about, people are going to have to show up in the midterms in 2022 and continue to vote and continue to enact change at the local level as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know that when the siege happened, it was just announced that we have a Democratic like Senate. Like it was like, and it's crazy. Like it's always been Republican, as long as I remember. And I think people think that that's what's gonna make the change, but I don't. I don't know. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think that's like the ultimate part in like making
I mean,
change, like
I
changing
think
levels of
that
power?
ultimately Democrats, now that they're back in power, they need to set their sights on kind of reforming our democratic system. The reality is that in the last 8 presidential elections, Democrats have won the popular vote 7 times out of 8. And 2 of those times that they won the popular vote, they lost the election because of a really antiquated electoral college system. The reality is that, the reason that you have trouble remembering when Democrats controlled the Senate is because the Senate, as it's made up, favors Republicans because of how much more weight smaller states are given in the U.S. Senate. So, the reality is that California, which has, you know, I don't know, 50, 100 times as many people as Wyoming. They have the same number of U.S. senators, and so that's why, yeah, people are pushing for statehood for Washington D.C. People are pushing for Puerto Rico to be given statehood, um, and people are pushing for a new Voting Rights Act to be enacted. Yeah, after the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act from the 1960s, um, Republicans, yeah, in recent years have been pushing to enact laws designed to make it harder to vote. And I think a lot of the problem, yeah, for why we don't get more political participation in elections is just how hard we make it to vote in this country. And so I think hopefully, yeah, it's not just about like, if we win, the presidency and the Senate, then we can enact, these reforms on, the climate or healthcare or taxes, and those issues are important. But hopefully, you're also paying attention to the fact that the Electoral College is majorly biased towards the Republican Party. The Senate is majorly biased towards a Republican Party, and enacting reforms to um, make it easier to voting and make our democracy work better.
Yeah, it. I feel like we haven't really caught on to what democracy really means. Like, I feel like it's just got lost in all the politics of everything. Like, what do you think is like the number one thing that's wrong with politics and like political leaders? Because I feel like me, like learning about everything, people think that conservatives just care about abortion, limiting like female rights and all that stuff. But really, I think that they've just changed the Catholic meaning. Like, what does it mean to be Catholic, and what does it mean to have the beliefs of a Catholic? Like, they take a whole Bible and just take out one piece of it. So, like, what do you think is like the biggest problem in politics? Do you think it's just the twisting of words, or like they just take everything and just use it for their agenda type of thing?
I mean, I think that there's a couple things here. One is that yeah, that we are increasingly no longer all accepting the same facts. And yeah, to go back to what I said before, climate change is real. And there's a large portion of the country that doesn't believe that climate change is real. And yeah, the 2020 presidential election was free and fair and was not stolen. Um, but there's a large portion of the country, including the majority of Republican voters, who believe that the election was stolen and that Trump actually won. You can go down the list. Yeah, I still remember when half of the Republican Party was saying that President Obama was not born in the United States. When we stop having the same set of facts and reality that we can all agree upon, we get into a major, yeah, bit of trouble where we can't really have dialogue if we don't have a kind of shared reality that we are all operating within. So that's, yeah, a big thing, and part of that is related to, and this the other kind of thing is, yeah, is that you have yeah, these kind of different media landscapes, and it's, yeah, you have kind of conservative media, both, Fox News, but also kind of far right outlets like Breitbart and the Drudge Report, who are pushing one kind of worldview, and one that is very disconnected from yeah, the worldview you would get from watching more mainstream news outlets. And so there's all that. Yeah, you have these kind of two sets of realities, and these two kind of truths that are being propagated in this country. And yeah, let's be clear, there are facts still. There are, truths to some of these issues. Not every issue has two sides to it. Some issues really only have one side. Some issues have more than two sides. And so we need to kind of grapple with that, and also, yeah, really kind of reform our democratic institutions, and our voting procedures, and how the electoral college works and the Senate works, all those types of things, to, yeah, make our um, democratic system work and make sense. And I think that hopefully should um, um, make a difference. But none of these things, there's no cure-all to these things, and I think nobody knows what, is this just going to keep getting worse? Is this the beginning of something, or is this the end of something? And I think we're going to see.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask how are you? Like, how's your quarantine and your whole semester been? Cause it's crazy. We had to transition. I remember I was in your class still.
I mean, I think I can, probably speak for most Queens College professors when I say that teaching online sucks. It's both a lot more work and much harder for faculty, and I also think that it's not as good of a education for students, and we don't get the yeah, the fun of teaching is being in a classroom with students and interacting with students and engaging with students, and don't get that online, at least not in the same way. And so yeah, that's hard. That said, pandemics are pandemics, and you got to do what you got to do to keep people safe, and people should stay safe, keep quarantining and socially isolating and wear a mask and do what you need to do so we can get you know to the other side of this and restore some sense of normalcy afterwards. But quarantine's been hard. The last 10 months have been hard, but surviving. I'm healthy, so you know could be worse.
Surviving.
Yeah.
um, do you plan on getting the COVID vaccine if it ever reaches, people with, our age groups?
Yeah, I do. I look forward to getting it. I am, yeah, I frequently check to see, yeah, when ish it looks like um, I'll be eligible to get it.
Hmm.
It's probably going to be a while, but yeah, I look, vaccines aren't the cure all. Even yeah, the vaccines that are being rolled out are only 95% effective, and it's going to be a while before anything in this country looks normal again. But yes, I do look forward to getting a vaccine once it's available.
Yeah, I work in a pharmacy, so as a tech, not a pharmacist. Um, but yeah, we've been getting a lot of phone calls asking if we're gonna get it because I think I read an article that Biden said that pharmacies are gonna take a big role in rolling out this vaccine, and we're trying. I work in Stop and Shop, so the bigger and the nicer Stop and Shops exist in Long Island. So
Mm-hmm.
they're trying it over there first, and they're gonna do because we're getting Moderna, and Moderna only lasts
Hmm.
for 6 hours. Like that's how long it's effective,
Hmm.
and we need to do an
Oh wow.
appointment based, and we need to make sure no one calls out. It's like a long and grueling process, and it just sucks
Yeah.
because there's these old people coming up to me saying, I'm 81. I think I should be able to get
Yeah.
it. And it's like, I know,
Yeah.
but I don't know what to tell you.
You're saying that you don't have control over who gets to get a vaccine.
I don't
That's
I don't know.
it's a
They just keep
crime.
on asking all these questions and they give me the sad look, the
Yeah.
sad old people look, and I'm just like, I don't know what to tell
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, unfortunately, from my knowledge of this is limited, but from what I gathered, you know, we didn't put in place the infrastructure that we need to roll out the vaccine, to say nothing of the fact that we don't have enough doses of it.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's gonna be a brutal next couple months. Trying to hopefully get people vaccinated, and it's I don't know, it's gonna be a while.
Do you think how crazy, like, wait, not do you think, but can you believe how crazy it is that people didn't believe that masks like can protect you from germs and what, like, it's so crazy because it's the same concept as washing your hands.
Yeah. Yeah, and that gets back to what I was saying before about like the dangers when we don't have a kind of shared set of facts and realities, which is that like masks are like a really, really easy way to keep both yourself and more importantly other people safe. Yeah, and if everybody would just universally wear masks, we wouldn't have 400,000 people dead.
Mhm.
And the fact that we can't all get on board with masks, which is like the easiest, simplest, cheapest, thing to do. The fact that we can't all, 100% of, population get on board with everybody should wear a mask. That's distressing, needless to say.
Yeah, what's the craziest thing that you think has happened all of 2020? Like the craziest. Or top three, because it's a lot of crazy stuff.
Oh God.
You're like, this is a year you won't forget.
Okay. I mean, it's the year that I won't forget and also desperately want to forget. I hope, yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't even know where to start, but yeah, like I mean, just from the things that were powerful and inspiring, Black Lives Matters protests over the summer and seeing, yeah, millions of people um, coalescing around that to the horrifying things of yeah, seeing um, yeah, the White House take COVID so not seriously, and for so many people to die and have their lives impacted, and for this country, yeah, for so many people in this country to um, want to, you know, reopen and let people die so that it won't, hurt their businesses and hurt the
Yeah.
economy. Like it's been horrifying and depressing year, needless to say. And you want to write it off as, well, 2020 was crazy and awful, and write it off. But then we get to 2021, and what happens at the Capitol happens, and yeah, I think the reality is we have we're not going to be able to just wash our hands of 2020 and wash our hands of the last 4 years and pretend like it didn't happen. Like there's real damage that's been done, and a lot of the same forces are still present in this country and in our society. So we're going to have to figure out how we fix all the stuff that's broken and prevent, you know, more horrible things from happening in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like, I used to work in a school in Middle Village as like an after school program, and we still did it, with this year. And in my head, I was like, who wants, their kids to go to an after school program that they might get COVID? Like it's really hard. And the number of conversations I've had about everything, it's like people said, they're like, oh, I hate that indoor dining closed. I said, I mean, it's for like the betterment of everyone else. It's just to be safe. And they said, but they didn't close down all the protests. And I said, that's a First Amendment right. I was like, you can't close it down like a business. That's crazy. And I think, and I've had also other conversations with teachers. Like in this school is like a elementary school, and these teachers are like saying that Trump is trying to help everyone. Well, one teacher,
Yeah.
she overheard a conversation that me and a coworker were having, and she butted in, and she was like, Trump is trying to help us.
Oh
Trump is
God.
trying to um help the little people like us, and he's exposing everyone. And me knowing that I wasn't gonna go anywhere with her, middle-aged white woman, really strong about her beliefs, and even said that Candace Owens was a pretty good source.
Oh
I
God.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, do I say something or do I just leave it? So I just left it and I heard everything she had to say. And I think that the most thing that really stuck with me was I don't see color. Because as a
Yeah.
teacher, you have to teach
Yeah.
kids about what it means to be different colors and how to treat it. And like, what are your thoughts on like the fact that they're including slavery and racism into the school systems now? Or well, they're trying to, I guess.
I'll first say that our school system and our education system have been teaching racist ideas for a very, very long time now. And we need to kind of reckon with that and grapple with that. And yeah, it is horrifying to me to hear you recounting a story of a teacher saying that they don't see race, and yet they also love Candace Owens. Um, but yeah, I mean, for a long time in this country,
It was
yeah, we've
crazy.
had, and other people have, written about this, but our, you know, elementary school and high school textbooks, basically like the state of Texas and their school system has had a kind of veto over what gets put in our textbooks, and so the Civil War has been taught in a very specific way, one that emphasizes states' rights, and that it was about economics, and um, yeah, the Civil War was about slavery, and yeah, the period that followed saw the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, and yeah, there's a long history of white supremacy in this country, and long history of supporters of outright fascism in this country, and that doesn't get taught in the way that it needs to. One thing that yeah, in one course I taught about um, representations of the Japanese during World War II and kind of U.S. made propaganda films. And while teaching on that, I talk about Japanese internment camps in this country and how hundreds of thousands of Japanese American, yeah, American citizens of Japanese descent were rounded up and put in camps in this country during World War II. And most of my students didn't know about that. That's an important part of yeah America's history. There's this kind of yeah
Mhm.
assumption that yeah America's fought for good and for patriotic things and fought against fascism in World War II and all that. Then yeah, that's true. But there's also this other thing that's been going on that we need to emphasize and grapple with. And so our education system needs to do a lot better job of reckoning with race and racism and this country's history. And I hope that that will begin to change. And you have educators and academics pushing back on some of this. At the same time, you have a backlash. So just yeah, a couple days ago on Martin Luther King Day, the Trump administration released the 1776 report, which was their new patriotic version of how American history should be taught, and it was their reaction against the New York Times doing what they call the 1619 Project, which was an attempt to kind of recenter America's history around the introduction of slaves and slavery into North America and into this country. And yeah, we're going to kind of continue to have battles over this, and those battles of how we're teaching US's history, that makes such a big difference to yeah how this country is going to move forward and whether we're going to at some point be able to reckon with the bad stuff in our history and learn from it in a real way.
Man, that's crazy. Like, wow. Like I just remember like looking through my posts yesterday and seeing how Martin Luther King was just being posted as a peaceful man, and I had to ask my younger brother and sister because my sister is in high school and my brother he's starting middle school. So I asked them like, what do you know about Martin Luther King? And they're like, didn't he just like walk for people and like give us like maybe he was a hero? I said he did more than that. Um, I told them I was like he after he died, people rioted and things got done after they rioted. Like if you don't, I told them if you don't think that riots change, like make change, it's like you don't see that it does happen and it does make change and it did happen before, which is why people are so prone to turning to riots when they want change to happen. And I just hated seeing that a lot of people were posting BLM is using MLK's words and twisting them, and it it mind boggles me how they just forget a part of history. Like, what do you hope? Um, will come out of like all this stuff that everyone's doing to make an equal system of a sort.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say two things. First is, yeah, about MLK. Yeah, this is a topic I've taught in courses before about, yeah, the kind of appropriation of MLK's legacy by conservatives. And yeah, he often gets emphasized that he was, yeah, that he wanted, colorblind world that, and so you get the quote again and again that he, has a dream of,
Mhm.
people not being judged by their color. And um, the people, yeah, a lot of those people who are quoting that part of what MLK said would hate if they bothered to read the rest of what he said.
Mhm.
MLK was in favor of affirmative action. He was anti-capitalist. He was yeah, pushing back in his later years about he about poverty and about the unfair treatment of poor people in this country. When he was assassinated, he was the most hated political public figure in the U.S. He was not this beloved, everybody can get behind figure. He was hated. He was immensely controversial, and yeah, it's great that this country now celebrates MLK as a as an important figure in this country's history. But in doing so, we should reckon with the fullness of MLK. And sorry, your other question was, yeah, about what do I hope? Where do things go from here?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't. I don't have an easy answer for that. Like I said, I hope that, yeah, we commit to reforming our democratic process. I hope that, yeah, we enact real change designed to, yeah, combat, yeah, structural, racial, economic, gender inequalities in this country, and yeah, do so in a way that's not just symbolic, but is actually getting at the roots and structures of these problems. There's a lot of work to be done. I don't think there's any one, yeah, magic bullet that'll fix everything, and it's gonna take a lot of work, not only by, yeah, politicians, but by ordinary people, by, yeah, not, yeah, by continuing to protest and by continuing to vote in the years ahead, and not just being like, well, we got rid of Trump and now we can all move on, and and everything will be fine now, and then inevitably get disappointed that everything isn't fine. You don't get to stop caring and stop paying attention. It's a constant process that needs to happen. So hope people keep doing that.
Yeah, like I was just looking back right now, like on how the different schools that I've been to, like um I I went to middle school in a very different neighborhood than I am in. So like Maspeth is, predominantly like Italian Irish. And when I went to middle school, I ended up going to Corona, IS-61. I don't know why, but my mom was just like, just go there, you know. They have a program. But I get there and it's really different than like the school I've been in. Like everything's kind of, it's a lot of color. It's diverse there. It's mostly Latinos and African Americans in that school, and my teachers were just filled with color.
Mhm.
There wasn't any Asian teachers because it wasn't like that. But when I got to high school, it was Massfield High School, and I just saw how white it was. Like I was looking at all the staff, and like there was only like two, three people of color that were teachers, and it was really different because in middle school, my English teacher actually gave us books about um people of color as like young adult books. So it was Sharon
Mhm.
M. Draper. I don't know if you know who that is, but like she writes books
Mhm.
about um African American adolescents, and it's really good because you see the difference in these writings. And then when I get to high school, I see all these white writings and classical books. Like what did we read about? We read the Odyssey and
Mhm. Yeah, We read that too.
Yeah, so I'm like looking and I'm like, wow, like we actually learned stuff when I was in middle school, but now I'm here and I'm trying to learn Latin and all these things that like
Yeah.
I don't think will really help me, socially or think more. So it's I think when the difference in like where you are too also affects how you learn.
Yeah, and look, it's a yeah, and I'd say this recognizing my own privilege as a white man, which is that yeah, I never had to look far to find people who look and sound like me.
Mhm.
But as you get older, you hopefully realize that that's not the experience for everybody, and there is a power in seeing yourself, seeing yourself in other people and in people in positions of power and in the media. Yeah, that when it's incredibly disempowering to feel invisible. It's incredibly disempowering when, yeah, um, none of your teachers look like you, and you go to the movies and none of the people in the movies look like you. That's an incredibly disempowering feeling. And yeah, seeing people look like you again isn't, that's not enough on its own. We need, policies that are going to combat these structural inequalities, but at the same time, yeah, representation does matter in a real way.
Yeah, I think um like it's so crazy cuz like even growing up, the only thing that people really like recognized me with was you look like Mulan. It's like
Oh, God.
it's like I'm Filipino. I'm not even Chinese.
Not the same place. It's not the same place.
Yeah, and like it's crazy cuz even when the coronavirus started, someone was saying, "Oh my god, it's all their fault. It's China's fault. It's ridiculous." And I'm standing next to them. I'm like, "Damn Asians, right?" Like, and he was like, "You're not Asian." I was like, "I'm Filipino." He's like, "That's not Asians." I'm like, "Yes, it is." And it was just like the weirdest conversation. Like, I had so many weird conversations this year. I had to like really look at myself and think, who am I friends with? Like, like this is just like a weird. It was a weird thing entirely, and just fighting about geography of where I'm from was like, what? You're gonna argue with me and tell me where I'm from? Like, it's crazy, and I just
Yeah, it's always nice when someone who's not in a particular group gets to, you know, tell people in that group, whether they're in it or not. That's always great.
yeah, it was, and I think that I think that we like people say that we should be able to get along even though we don't have the same political views. And I agree with that. I think that if you are a Republican, then whatever, you're a Republican, you have these beliefs. But I also don't think you should go ignoring about like real problems that are actually happening. There's a difference between having different beliefs and just ignoring a problem and not really actively thinking about it. Like you can say all you want that like black people brought it on themselves. How did they bring it on themselves? Like that's the problem. Like how did they? Like they don't choose to be black, and they also don't choose to get stopped by like a cop if a cop just so feels to stop them for a particular reason of the skin color. So like,
Yeah.
do you think that we should like what I said? Like, is it entirely like impossible to be like get along and have different views. Like it's not entirely possible, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think two things are true. One is that, yeah, I mean, my mom's not a Republican, but we have political disagreements and we argue, and she's still my mom, and yeah, and I think that, you know, yeah, we should, talk to, people who don't, have the same politics as us, and
Hmm.
have civil dialogue. That said, there are people who are, with their political views, are actively doing harm to other people, and it's it's hard for me to have empathy for people who fundamentally don't have empathy for other people. And so, yeah, you might have a, you know, great relationship with the police, and never have any problems with the police, but you should try to have some empathy for the fact that your experience is not universal, and that there are people who have very different types of interactions with the police. And yeah, you might be, you know, in this country legally, and so, you know, wonder, you know, yeah, why should I care about the fact that families are being separated at the border, and refugees aren't being allowed in this country, but have some empathy for other people. And so, yeah, on the one hand, I do think, you know, dialogue across political difference is important, and it is a value that I care about. On the other hand, it's hard when you're being asked to have empathy for people who don't have empathy for other people,
Mhm.
and that'll always be a challenge.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna ask my last question, like overall, because this is really good conversation. Um, do you think that like to go back to the siege, because like this was like what my
Yeah, sorry
episode was
about that.
supposed to be about, but we covered a lot of stuff. Um, no, 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 it's really good because we're covering a lot of ground about Trump's presidency and how it affected everything as a whole. People just think that he was a bigot in office, but no, he opened everyone's eyes about everything, and like there's a lot to think about. Um, do you think that the protests, the the siege of the Capitol, do you think that kind of aligns with what Trump represented?
um in short, yes. I mean, I think that's true in like a couple different ways. So one is, yeah, he has, Trump over the last 4 or 5 years, he has steadfastly refused to denounce his, yeah, white supremacist and fascist leaning supporters. And he's refused to denounce, yeah, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, and he refused to condemn white supremacist terrorists after the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally. And at the presidential debate just in October, he refused to denounce the violent Proud Boys. He has again and again refused to condemn his extremist supporters. And those supporters have in turn taken that lack of condemnation to be a sign of Trump's support. And you can see videos from inside the Capitol as people are rioting there of them saying Trump would want us to do this. We are Trump's army. And so in that way, yeah, his kind of lack of denunciation of these people is absolutely furthered them kind of pushing and doing new kind of, yeah, scary actions like the events at the Capitol. And then also there's just the very direct way of Trump repeatedly saying that the election was stolen and that he actually won in a landslide, but there was massive voter fraud. Um, Accepting the results of the election and conceding is the fundamental basis of our democracy. It's the way it works. And it's been clear for 4 or 5 years now that Trump doesn't fundamentally believe in democracy. He doesn't believe in checks and balances and separations of power. When he in 2016, when he lost the Iowa caucus to Ted Cruz, he accused Ted Cruz of having stolen it through voter fraud. He's been doing this and has done this repeatedly. Um, and in the wake of, yeah, the election in November 2020, he um, fought in the courts, lost repeatedly, and continued to say that they stole the election from us, and that you need to show strength in battling against these people who've stolen the election. That's an incitement to violence. Telling his supporters that is an incitement to violence. And yeah, so all that's just to say that Trump bears very real culpability for what happened at the Capitol. Though I'll also say that he's only able to do that because of how many Republicans lined up behind him, and how many Republican senators were willing to back his claims about voter fraud in the election and the election having been stolen. And even after the events at the Capitol, when they were voting to certify the election results, there were still over half of Republican congressmen who were voting against certifying the election results. And that's terrifying. So yes, Trump very much bears culpability here and laid the groundwork for the assault on the Capitol, but it's also not just about Trump. There is a broader problem in the Republican Party of allowing extremism to fester.
You have been listening to QC Pod, the podcast about all things Queens College. We are on Twitter at QC Pod and on the web at qcpodcastlab.org/QC Pod. Our theme music is Lake Monsters by John Flansburgh of They Might Be Giants. I'm Samantha Galvez-Montiel. Thank you for listening.